Why I don't go to church anymore, but still believe in God. Hello, everybody. It is Jeremy, your average Joe from Southern California. Welcome back to my channel. This is a topic that I wanted to speak on eventually. This is going to be a sensitive topic because it is about spirituality, my spirituality. So with that being said, my goal with this video isn't to bash people or pick on people who do go to church. My goal with creating this video is to just talk about my personal experience with church, my personal experience as a church-going individual. So let's get started. I grew up going to church. Me, my dad, my two older sisters. We grew up in the non-denominational evangelical Christian church out here in Southern California. For me, it was just routine as a little kid, going to Sunday school, doing the worship music, hand gestures, and the little Bible studies. Like, to me, it was all routine. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone. This was just my personal experience. And then fast forward years later, I'm 18 years old. I'm fresh out of high school, and I get recruited in a certain church. Now, in this video, I'm not going to name specific churches for the sake of privacy. I'm just going to keep it very general and call the churches that I was affiliated with as church. Okay, so at 18 years old, I joined a new church group that I did not grow up with. And it's interesting as to how I got recruited into this church group because according to my research and according to experience, this church group recruits heavily on college campuses. But lo and behold, I wasn't recruited on a college campus. I was recruited at a mall. During this time, I was working at a mall in California, Orange County, California. And I was working at a See's Candies. If you don't know what a See's Candies is, it's a chocolate shop, a candy shop. And I was there for a seasonal position. And I remember going to work one afternoon. I didn't want to go in right away because it was kind of early. So I decided to wait in the food court area. As I'm waiting, I see a gentleman sitting at a table not too far away from where I am, and I make conversation with him because it's like, hey, I'm new to the area. I grew up Christian. Why not make new friends? So I talked to this man who's reading something that looks like the Bible, and it is. I asked him, hey, what are you reading? It's the Bible. And then soon enough, we end up in a conversation, we exchange numbers, and then the rest is history. I eventually dedicate a good portion of my life to this church. I get baptized in this church. I attend a bunch of meetings, a bunch of Bible studies, a bunch of conferences, you name it. So, what exactly caused me to leave this church group? Well, good question. Let me tell you. A core doctrine of theirs ultimately led me to leave this church group. And what was that core doctrine? You need a college degree, or you need a college education to be useful to God. Right. I could sense some of you, raising an eyebrow. Like, I raised an eyebrow too at 18 years old. And the interesting thing about this is that, when you join this church group, they don't rub it in your face. They're not pressing you about finishing your education or finishing college. When you join this group, your mentality is just like, oh, I'm in a college-aged Bible study. I'm just going to, go to the Bible studies and then, go on my merry way back to class. Like, that's your mentality. That was my mentality. But no, a core belief in that group was you need a college education or college degree to be useful to God. Now, they obviously defend that belief with the Bible, and it makes sense to a degree. They'll talk about Paul and how Paul was educated, and he wrote half of the New Testament and the majority of the epistles. They'll talk about Moses. There's a verse in the book of Acts that says something like, and please forgive me for not quoting this verbatim, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. And, it makes sense to a degree. Many or some people in the Bible were very educated, Moses and Paul. But do you really need a college degree to be useful to God? I don't think so. I had teachers in high school that were atheists. My biology teacher said that the Bible was just about primitive men talking about God. My English teacher, I remember he was talking about the Bible and he literally called it a myth. How is God using them? God's not using them. There's educated people that willingly choose to not believe. So, think about the reasons as to why people go to hell. He's going to hell because he murdered somebody. He's going to hell because he stole something. You're going to hell because you don't have a college degree. Come on, man. Looking back, I cringe. But you got to understand that 18-year-old me was in a completely different headspace. 18-year-old me wanted friendship. And what better ways to make friends than to join a church group? After all, I did grow up Christian. Why not make Christian friends? And that's something that really disappoints me about organized religion and going to church. We know that society is toxic. There's no doubt about it. But lo and behold, I turned to organized religion in church just to learn that church is just as toxic and judgmental as society. It's a big disappointment. What can I say? So, what led me to leave this church group? Well, like I said, it was their core belief that you needed to be educated to serve God. But also, an event happened to me last year with this particular church group. So this was around last year, 2025. I was walking around a college campus and I was talking to a fellow member of this church group whom I've also known for 6 years. And I revealed to him that I don't have a college degree and I'm 25 years old. And what happens next is very disappointing, because after I tell him that I don't have a college degree, he doesn't make fun of me per se, but he scolds me. He says, look, if you would have just gotten your degree at 18, you wouldn't be worrying about this right now. And then I tell him about my siblings, because my siblings don't have college degrees either. And then he goes after them too. Wow, you and your siblings have a correlation. You don't have an education, or something like that. And, that was just very disappointing to me, because it's like, really? I joined this church group hoping that it would be different than society. But lo and behold, I'm getting judged. I'm getting picked on for not having a college degree. That's not love. That's not the love that's talked about in John 3:16. There was this weird emphasis on being useful to God. And if you're listening to this right now and you're in a church group that emphasizes being useful, run away. Run away. Okay? Being useful and loving someone doesn't coexist. Okay? I've yet to hear a husband say something like, I love my wife because she's useful to me. Do you see how crazy that sounds? You love your wife because she's useful to you? Give me a break. You don't love your wife because she's useful to you. And this works the other way too. You know, when it comes to being useful to people, look, I work and I'm useful to my manager in many ways. But am I obligated to love my manager? And is my manager obligated to love me? No. No. So you see, there can't be an emphasis on love and being useful because the two don't coexist. They can never coexist. It's either one or the other. So, where am I in this phase of my life? I don't go to church anymore. Obviously. What do I do instead? I have a Bible here. It's a NKJV. It's a New King James Version. I read that. I pray. And you know what? If God puts something on my heart concerning going to a church, you know, I'll listen. I'll obey. But as of right now, I'm going to pay attention to my personal experiences and make decisions off of that. Okay? So, let's talk about some of the other things as to why people don't go to church. Moving away from my personal experiences. So, we're going to get a little bit off topic here. So, one of the accusations that people have against Christians is that Christians are hypocrites. They're hypocritical. They say one thing and then they do the other. That is true to a degree. As a church-going Christian, I've seen hypocrisy. I've seen hypocrisy in a lot of people. I've seen Christians go to church on Sunday and then make fun of somebody the next day. Like, that's the kind of stuff that turns people away from God instead of drawing them near to God. And I get it. But, you know, you also have to understand that not everyone's like that. But either way, you know, I would understand as to why that right there would make someone not want to go to church. And, you know, I've seen the bad aspects of Christians myself, you know, not just other people. You know, I don't just listen to what other people say. Once again, I take my own experiences into inventory. And I recall this one occasion where I was in a pretty bad spot in my life. This was a year ago. I had just turned 25 years old. I had a big problem at that time, and I was contemplating on actually leaving the Christian faith altogether, as in like becoming an atheist. So I ended up calling this hotline where you can talk to a pastor, and the person on the end of that hotline gave me probably the best piece of advice that I've ever heard a Christian say. And that is, the Christian life isn't about making God happy. It's about a relationship with God. Now, like I said, that's the best piece of advice that a Christian has ever given me. But at the same time, it raises an eyebrow. Because, yeah, you know, having a relationship with God sounds good. But according to my personal experiences, the Christian life isn't just about a relationship. You know, think about my time in that church group I was in, being useful to God, having a college degree. Obviously, there's more to it than a relationship in that church. In the church that I grew up with, the church that I grew up with as a child, the one that I went to with my dad and my sisters, people would pressure me to stand up during worship. And if you didn't stand up, people would give you the eye like this. Come on now. That's not love. And then I remember when I was in high school, like people were pressuring me to be an usher and to put chairs away after service. And I was pressured into doing that. Initially, I didn't want to do it, but I gave in to the pressure, and I eventually ended up being an usher at that church. Well, I don't know if I was officially an usher, but I just remember assisting the ushers with putting chairs away and setting chairs up before and after services. But I didn't want to do it. And if I were to say no, then I would obviously meet some kind of resistance. That's not love. That's not a relationship. And then you have Christians that also go around and they try to intimidate you with this particular question. So, how do you know if you're really a Christian? Or how do you know if you're really saved? Like, even as a church going Christian, other Christians would come up to me and ask me that question. And that question has nothing to do with my personal salvation. That question is for the sake of intimidation. It's like, look at what I have versus what you don't have. It's no different than bragging about a college degree. It's not spiritual. It's a form of bullying. So yeah, the Christian life is a relationship with God until it isn't. It's also about getting a college degree. It's also about putting chairs away after service. It's also about standing up during worship. So on one hand, I do agree with that lady, a relationship with God. But on the other hand, I have my personal experiences that tell me otherwise. What can we possibly do now? I'll tell you what you can do. Pick and choose what works for you spiritually. Pick and choose what works for you spiritually. One thing that I've noticed is that the Christians who do that are the happiest. Look at my friend from high school. Him and I were one and the same, failing school, not caring about anything. But then once he graduates from high school, he eventually becomes a successful barber. And now he has a beautiful wife and a baby girl, and the means to put a roof over his own head. Meanwhile, I'm sticking myself in Bible studies, and I'm a 24-year-old man-child that uses Bible studies to escape responsibilities. I eventually see him last year. I saw him last December, my friend who became a barber. I saw him last December, and he tells me that he is a Christian. And it blows my mind because, how he was in high school is the complete opposite as to what you would think a Christian is. But he was calling himself a Christian when I saw him. And that just goes on to show you that when you pick and choose what you want to believe in, you become the most happiest. You become the happiest, excuse me. Picking and choosing what you want to believe in is genuinely spiritual. Don't do what I did. Don't just nod your head like this to anybody talking about the Bible. When I was 18 years old, if you were to start talking about the Bible, this would be me. Nowadays, that's not me. If you start talking to me about the Bible, I may listen to you, but there's going to be a filter on my ear. And the moment that I hear some BS, I'm leaving. I don't care about your biblical doctrine. I don't care how accurate it seems. If I smell BS, I'm leaving. Okay? So, End of rant. End of discussion. My greatest advice to all of you out there, if you are in a similar position that I was in at 18 years old, you're looking for friends at church, you're contemplating on joining a Bible study, I'm not here to persuade you out of it, but I will say, beware. Beware. Remember what happened to me, and remember my story. Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening. Expect more content like this, just one-on-one advice, one-on-one wisdom. Please subscribe if you're new, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.